Hey, welcome back to the Collective Church NWA Experience. I hope last week some of you got a chance to walk through the outline that we did that looked at Deuteronomy 6 and out of the Mark passage as we kind of provided a different experience for you on Labor Day. And today we're moving into a new series, and there's no creative title for it. It's just a series out of 1 Peter 2, looking at the priesthood of the believers. And really today, it's kind of like the prequel a little bit. We'll kind of get to what it looks as the priesthood, as the Bible points out. We're going to kind of look at that more specifically next week. Today's a little bit of a prequel at the very first part of 1 Peter 2, these verses 4 and 5. Before we get there, I'd love to kind of know if you've ever had an identity crisis, and not that this needs to be a place for super sad comments or true confessions or anything like that, but some of us have had maybe some humorous identity crises in our life where maybe we tried out a certain fad, or maybe we, tried a different style of dress, or maybe we tried out a different type of personality, or maybe we have found ourselves at times where we tried to put on that we were someone else and didn't really know who we were. Well, for me, that was in fourth grade. I got invited to this girl's birthday party, and I was super pumped. Hadn't been invited to a lot of boy-girl birthday parties. They had all been hey, everyone get together, we're gonna have an Incredible Hulk party, and here's your lunchbox and stuff like that, as a present. So the fact that in fourth grade I was invited to this girl's boy-girl party, it was in her backyard, in her house. I remember showing up and there was fun food, and all these people were man, I see you people, you're in my math class, you're on the cheerleading team, at elementary cheerleading team. And I remember seeing a guy that was there that was an older sibling of this person's sister. And they were at the party too, just kind of hanging out, not really invited, but just kind of there. And I remember that he began to be really rude to my friend whose birthday it was. Just really kind of sarcastic. I now see it as passive aggressive, kind of bullying-ish. Thinking he was funny, but it was really kind of hurting her feelings and making it super uncomfortable. Even in my fourth grade, 9-year-old brain began to realize, okay, something's off here. So this was not, this is not the normal way that I handled conflict in fourth grade. My normal way of handling it would be just to ignore it and to pretend like it's not there. But for some reason, I decided I was going to stand up for my friend, and I was going to be her protector. I was going to come in to myself and just be exactly who I was supposed to be in this moment. So he was probably just a little bit across the yard, and I thought in my brain, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run at him as hard as I can, and I'm going to tackle him. Now, I never played tackle football. I didn't know what I was doing. I just thought what I'm going to do is run at him as hard as I can, and didn't have a lot of mass running with me, and so I just thought I'm just going to hit him as hard as I can. This is again a ninth grader, and so he was significantly bigger than I, and kind of had a little bit of a mean personality, and so he kind of had the whole package going on. And I remember starting to run toward him, and I didn't really have a good plan in mind outside of I'm just going to run as fast as I can at him, and hopefully I will knock him down, and everyone will see that I am the hero of the day. He will apologize. Girls will love me forever, and this girl will just think that I'm incredible, and maybe a little kiss on the cheek, maybe some high fives, all that kind of stuff. Victoria's putting me up on my, me up on their shoulders. I had these grandiose, grand ideas of what it was going to look like for me to be this fourth grader. And as I ran toward him, with just everything I had, a full-out sprint, I wonder what my friends were thinking as they were what is he doing? First off, how did he get invited to this party? And second off, what is he doing? And as I approached him, this ninth grader was standing. I remember that his back was to the house, and he was standing looking at the backyard. And I remember I didn't take a great angle, And so it wasn't like I was coming at him from his blind side. I just kind of came at him at whatever angle that I could muster up the courage to start from. And I remember him looking at me, and as soon as I got to him, he just bent down. I mean, just bent down, and I rolled off his back and flipped over him. It actually kind of seemed like a cool move, but I remember that like I just flipped over him just completely, legs in the air, landing on the ground. I landed on my back, and I remember him standing over me. He put a leg on one side of me and his right foot on the other side of me, and he held his hand over me and said, "Do you want me to hit you?" And I just remember thinking, "No, sir, I do not want you to hit me. This is completely panned out differently than the way I thought." Now, unfortunately, the parents saw this and thought I was the aggressor, and I got kicked out of the party and was asked to call my parents to come pick me up. So that was like my instance of trying to be here. I really didn't know exactly my giftings. I really didn't know the right way. I was kind of out of who I really was. Like I really didn't know my identity at that point. And, was able to, in my head, like live out a little bit of, I guess I'm the bad boy. I just got kicked out of a 4th grade party and took on a 9th grader. So that's the only time I've ever tried to get into a fight and failed miserably at it. But the thing I think about back to that time is I really didn't know who I was in that moment. Like, that's not the way that that wasn't the best way to handle that situation. And two, I really didn't know my identity in that moment. Like, I thought I was like something that I was not. And when I hear these verses that I'm going to read to you today, they really are a kind of a precursor to the series. So it's kind of like I'm using these verses, and we don't even really get to the main part until next week. But I feel like it's a great lead up because it's all in the same deal. So this is 1 Peter 2 verses 4 and the first part of 5. Okay, and it says this. It says, "As you come to him, a living stone rejected by men, but in the sight of God, chosen and precious, you yourselves, like living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house." Now, it's kind of a weird place where I'm stopping it. So I want you to know I recognize that it's kind of a weird place. If you pull back even before this and look at verses 1, it begins to say this in chapter 2, verses 1. "So put away all malice and all deceit and hypocrisy and envy and all slander. Like newborn infants, long for the pure spiritual milk, that by it you may grow up into salvation, if indeed you have tasted that the Lord is good." And then it's like this idea that there's still this analogy of trying to connect to God. And in verse 4, "As you come to him," as you come to Jesus, who is the living stone. You know, Isaiah 28:16 talks about him being a cornerstone. It talks about like that he's the sure foundation. He even uses the word precious. It's kind of like this is an allusion, not an illusion. It's alluding back to this Old Testament, this references of who Jesus is going to be. So as you come to Jesus, this living stone rejected by men, knowing that like he was going to be rejected by so many people, but in the sight of God, chosen and precious. Again, using that word precious again from Isaiah. In the sight of God, chosen and precious. Verse 5, "You yourselves, like living stones." So we as Christians, those who have been changed by Jesus Christ, those that like people that have come to Jesus by faith, we ourselves, like living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house. So I'm going to kind of stop it there. I'm going to read it one more time, but I'm going to stop it there before we move into the next part for next week. "As you come to him, a living stone rejected by men, but in the sight of God, chosen and precious. You yourselves, like living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house." These verses are really kind of helping us understand more of who we are, like our identity. Like, next week, as we talked about actually what it means to be like the priesthood of all believers, like what that actually looks like and means. I want to look at these verses a little bit closer. And Peter he's really trying to make some things clear. And like, I like this about what is happening. He's trying to make some things clear. And I read this in a commentary, and it says this. It says, Peter is clarifying that as people come to Jesus by faith, as people experience salvation, as people experience the rescue of who Jesus is, Peter is clarifying that as people come to Jesus by faith, they are joined together like living stones or like living bricks in order to build a spiritual house, which is the true church on earth. So this, like, these living stones, these living bricks, in order to build, or as in the version I use, are being built up. This spiritual house, which is the true church on earth, which is the true body of believers that are coming together. Peter is trying to make it clear that, listen, as people come to Jesus, as people experience salvation, that they are building up like these living stones that are building this spiritual house. Now, it's not a physical temple like what people previous would have known. It's not even a previous tabernacle, or it's not a physical house. It is this spiritual, invisible house that is being built up by the people, that as they come to faith, they're like building blocks that are built on the foundation of who God is, of who Jesus is. When I think about the fact that there are these bricks that are being built, I remember when we built our house back in, it started in 2015, ended in 2016. And honestly, I'd never built a house before, and really was very naive to what that process looked like. And not every day, but almost every day, and several times a week, we would come and watch, and we would watch them clear the land, and then we watched the foundation go in, and we watched then, the studs to begin to make the different, different levels of the house, and then added the second level on, and then the sheetrock began to go up, and then we began to just realize that once the sheetrock was up, and they mudded in bed and did everything, that as the bricks started going up, man, just it began to resemble something that as more and more bricks went up, it's not that it wasn't looking like a house before, but as those bricks went up and as it began to be built in the different layers, and then the other ones were built on top of them, it just began to be like, oh man, that is our house. Like that is his house. And so, like, this idea that when people come to faith, that we are being built, like we as living bricks, that we are joining together like these living stones and these living bricks that are building this spiritual house, this church, the true church, who is these living stones, these people that we get to be a part of a building process. It talks also about him being the living stone. Like there's in 1 Peter, as we talk about who we are, it talks about him first in verse 4, saying a living stone rejected by men, establishing Jesus as the living stone. And that as living stones, as we're qualified and as we're clarified in verse 5, you yourselves like living stones, that we are able to live because we're connected to the person who is the source of life. We are able to live, we are able to build, and we are able to be building living stones because we are connected to that person, to Jesus, who brings life. And that we get to be a part of building this spiritual house, the true church that is on earth, that is this like global invisible body. Now, obviously, we don't talk a lot about the church being invisible. We obviously talk about wanting to see evidence of the church moving forward and church expansion and just what the church is doing and things. But I also love this idea that that there is no physical building that is the church, that it is us as living stones, living bricks that are being pulled together, that are joined together like living stones in order to build a spiritual house, the one true church on earth, that we get to be a part of being a builder because Jesus is a builder. And that the church is not some building that we can point to, but it is this kind of worldwide, invisible, connective body that is invisible because of who God is in us, but also that we see the visible of because we as people are the church that have an invisible God inside of us doing this incredible work that we get to see manifested as the work of the church. And then we look in verse 5 and we see to be built up. The idea there is like really like one of the initial core definitions of what that phrase means of being in verse 5 are being built up. The idea there is built up from the foundation. So it's like you are being built up, but it's almost like you can read that and just go, okay, you're being built up. But the meaning there is are being built up from the foundation because of the cornerstone mentioned in Isaiah 28:16, because of the true living stone that is our foundation, we are able to be built up, joined together like living bricks to build the one true church, to build this spiritual house that is this invisible force that is God in us, that's doing the work of the church, that leads us to do the work of the church. And when you read this, and then at the very end, I'm going to read like what we're going to cover next week. And again, when I say invisible, I'm talking about the work of God in us, like the Spirit of God that is in us, like what He is doing inside of us, that invisible work that we get to then live that out in an invisible sense as we move forward in obedience to what God has called us to do. But why is this important for us as individuals? Why is it important for us to understand this as individuals who are connected to the big church, the Big C church, and then for us as individuals connected to the collective church NWA, for those of us as individuals connected into like who we are as a local body of people, as a local spiritual house, as all this collection of living stones and living bricks. Why is this important for us? And moving into next week, I believe it's important because as we begin to see the role of like what a priest did previous to Jesus, as a priest did in his role in the temple, and then as we look at because of what Jesus did in instituting who we are able to be as a royal priesthood, what I love about that is like verses 4, 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 4, and the first part of verse 5 is recognizing that God is a builder, is recognizing that we get to be joined together and to be a part of this thing being built up. We get to be a part, and we are invited to be a part as living bricks, living stones to build this spiritual house, the church on earth, the true church that is on earth. And I think it's important for us to understand that we do have a role as connected to the builder, and we have a role as the bricks that are built up from the foundation. Jesus being the foundation, that we get to be built up and to be a part of this thing called the church, this spiritual house, that there is a building that comes with this, a building up. I'm sorry, not a building like a physical building. There is a building up that we get to be a part of because of the fact that we have faith in Jesus Christ. Because of the fact that we have come to Jesus by faith, that we are joined together like these living stones, like these living bricks. That it's important that we understand that we are empowered in that as we are joined together, as we are drawn together, there's an empowerment that we get to be a part of that building process, that we're being invited in to be a part of that process, and that being built up is great. But if you just build something up and you don't lay out the foundation, then you are building up, but you are not setting yourself up for success. That this actual word, to be built up, that actually phrase is recognized as being built up from a foundation, from the foundation. So we have a role in the part of building, of being built up. We are empowered by the main builder. And when I think about why this is important and what it leads to next week, let me read the rest of 1 Peter as the wind literally blew everything. Okay. So as you come to him, a living stone rejected by men, in the sight of God, chosen and precious, you yourselves, those who have come to faith in Jesus Christ, like living stones or living bricks, are being built up as a spiritual house, the one true church. To be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. To be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. I love that verses 4 and the first part of verse 5 kind of helps us understand who we are. We are living bricks because of our faith in Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ being the living stone of all living stones as the foundation, that we are allowed and we are invited to be joined together. We were brought together to build up from that foundation that builds the spiritual house, that builds the one true church, that we get to be a part, that we are a part of this building up of who the church is. And what I believe it sets up for next week is, as we look at the role of what it means to be this phrase, priesthood of all believers, of what it means to be in the priesthood in the context of what we're looking at in 1 Peter 2, 4 through 5. I love that it sets up that Jesus has a role and has a part for us to play. That there is a role for us as priests, and we have a part to play. That he is the builder, that he is the cornerstone, he is the living stone, is joining us together like those living bricks to be a part of what is being built up from the foundation. And I believe that who we are as priests, in the context of what this is saying, is part of that being built up from the foundation, from what God is doing, that we are a part. We are those living stone and those living bricks that get to be a part of that. And so as we look at that next week, we're going to pick up with the end part of these verses here that talk about, and the end of verse 5, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. I hope that we get a chance to kind of take this journey on this priesthood of the believers. Now, this is something that literally that there have been people that have been like, we really don't know exactly what it means, so we're going to trust the work of the Holy Spirit. There's some people that are like, man, this is what it means, and this is what, and this is the doctrine of that. What I am wanting to do is look at these two verses in the overall context of what they're leading us toward, and to know what it means to be built up from the foundation, joined together to be a part of the building up, and then looking at the role of what it means, like looking at what a priest was, and then looking at what it means for us to be in the priesthood, not occupationally as a pastor being a priest or like an official title as a priest, but actually as a priest, like to be in the priesthood, what that means to be invited to be a part of the process of building this church up from the foundation, from what God is doing. I'm excited about what that means for us as individuals. I'm excited about what that means for us as a church. And I'm excited about what that means for us moving forward. So, hey, listen, man, I believe that as we identify these things and know who we are to be, it helps us to really know our role, our function in the church. And so, man, I hope that as you guys walk through these questions that are going to be up on the online experience, that you guys kind of take some time to help do that. Again, listen, you don't ever need to feel pressure to talk in the chat or to type out things in the chat. Please know that you can be as silent or as vocal as you feel led to be. We want you to know that that is a place that I believe we get to come together and learn from each other, and allow this time and these passages for us to have a jumping off place to continue seeking truth. So listen, you have an incredible day. I can't wait for September 26th. We're going to have our next gathering at the City of Elm Springs. That address and more information is coming in the emails to come. So listen, have an incredible day, an incredible week, and we will see you next week.